step into your grandpa's garden, where everything just worked. The soil was rich, the plants stood proud, and not a single inch went to waste. Back then, it wasn't about fancy tools or expensive products. It was about wisdom, the kind passed down through dirt-stained hands and kitchen scrap experiments. Your grandparents knew how to turn simple things into thriving harvests, using what they had, wasting nothing, and working with the land, not against it. In this video, we're uncovering 75 ways Grandpa grew more food with less work. And trust me, the further we go, the more brilliant these old methods get. So make sure you watch right through to the end, because the last few tips are the ones which made all the difference. Starting with a hack you'd have never seen coming. Sponges and pots. This clever method relied on something simple from the kitchen. Sponges, cut to size and placed at the bottom of a pot, acted like hidden reservoirs. They soaked up excess water and released it slowly, keeping roots evenly moist. This prevented sudden wilting and protected delicate seedlings from drowning after heavy watering. Soil also stayed put, rather than leaking out through drainage holes. It worked especially well for herbs or ornamentals kept on windowsills where watering routines were less consistent. Grandma sometimes sprinkled a pinch of crushed eggshell on top of the sponge before filling with soil, adding calcium while keeping the moisture balance just right. What garden centers now sell as moisture mats was already solved with household scraps. The combination of water control and mineral boost made plants healthier, sturdier, and easier to care for without fuss or expense. Mouthwash flower trick. This was one of the most unexpected hacks using a bathroom staple. A diluted splash of mouthwash mixed into a vase of water kept cut flowers fresher for days. The alcohol and antiseptic properties killed bacteria that clog stems and shorten vase life. Just a spoonful per quart was enough to make roses or daisies last twice as long. It even worked outdoors in very small amounts to prevent mold from forming on leaves. Your grandpa often added a teaspoon of sugar alongside the mouthwash, feeding the blooms while the solution kept the water clean. This simple combination became a reliable way to extend the beauty of bouquets when store-bought packets weren't around. Households stretched the life of table arrangements, giving more value to every cut stem. It was a practical, no-nonsense method, and it worked with supplies already sitting in the bathroom cabinet. Potato growing method. Back then, many gardeners discovered you could grow a large crop of potatoes without much land. The trick was to build upward instead of spreading across the soil. People stacked earth, straw, or even wooden boards, adding seed potatoes layer by layer. As stems grew taller, they pulled up more soil, forcing new tubers to form along the buried stalks. This vertical approach produced more food in less space and reduced rot caused by soggy ground. Weeds were naturally choked out too. Your grandparents often tucked compost between the layers, feeding the crop as it grew taller and ensuring every harvest came up firm and healthy. Some families even built wooden boxes with slats that could be removed at harvest, revealing clean potatoes without much digging. The method wasn't just productive, it was efficient, and it gave households a steady supply of food from even the smallest gardens. Vinegar plant care. Gardeners long ago discovered vinegar was a sharp but effective tool when used carefully. A diluted spray could kill weeds creeping up between paving stones or paths without resorting to harsh commercial chemicals. The acetic acid burned back unwanted growth quickly, leaving vegetables and flowers free from competition. It was never applied directly on crops since it could scorch them, but in the right places, it worked remarkably well. Your grandparents often mixed weaker solutions with water to scrub white deposits off old clay pots, removing salt stains and killing surface fungi before reusing them for seedlings. Vinegar also helped clean tools, cutting through rust and grime with little effort. Kept on hand in every kitchen, it doubled as both a household cleaner and a garden aid. Modern weed sprays may be stronger, but this simple acidic liquid provided a safe, cheap, and accessible way to handle many garden problems. Banana peel fertilizer. Banana peels, instead of being discarded, made excellent plant boosters. When buried under rose bushes, tomatoes, or peppers, the skins slowly released potassium, phosphorus, and calcium, nutrients that strengthened stems and encouraged better flowering and fruiting. Some gardeners soaked them in water, creating a liquid fertilizer for easy use around roots. Your grandma often chopped the peels into small strips before digging them in, knowing this sped up decomposition and allowed plants to benefit faster. Others dried the peels, grinding them into powder to sprinkle around seedlings. It was a zero-cost way to enrich soil and recycle kitchen waste at the same time. The nutrients were gentle and slow-acting, so they never overwhelmed the roots, unlike some chemical alternatives. Before I continue, if you've picked up a new trick today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of gardeners. Cinnamon mold prevention? Cinnamon wasn't just for the kitchen. Gardeners discovered long ago that a sprinkle of cinnamon powder helped stop mold and fungus from taking over seedlings. When tiny sprouts began to dampen and collapse from fungal rot, dusting the soil surface with cinnamon created a natural antiseptic barrier. Your grandpa often mixed a pinch of it into potting soil when sowing seeds indoors, preventing that fuzzy white mold from forming on the top layer. It worked just as well on cuttings, too, helping wounds dry cleanly instead of rotting before roots appeared. The spice's natural antifungal oils offered protection without harming young plants or soil life. It also deterred ants and gnats hovering around moist trays. Modern gardeners buy expensive powders labeled organic seedling protectant, but the truth is, the same effect came from the spice rack all along. A spoonful of cinnamon saved entire trays of seedlings from early ruin. Rice water fertilizer. When rice was rinsed before cooking, the cloudy water was never wasted. That milky liquid, full of starch and trace nutrients, became a gentle fertilizer for plants. Your grandparents often poured it around herbs, spinach, or potted flowers, where it encouraged lush growth without risk of burning roots. The starch fed beneficial microbes in the soil, improving overall health and nutrient absorption. If left to sit for a day, the water began fermenting slightly, creating even richer plant foods similar to modern biofertilizers. Used once or twice a week, it gave small gardens an extra boost without cost. Because it was so mild, it could even be used for seedlings that couldn't handle stronger feeds. This clever trick turned ordinary kitchen waste into a steady source of nourishment. What some saw as leftover rinse water, old gardeners recognized as a natural elixir that strengthened soil life and fueled greener, sturdier plants. Rusty nail iron enrichment. Old nails weren't thrown away, they were buried near plants that needed a touch of iron. As the metal rusted, it slowly released iron oxide into the soil, correcting yellowing leaves and weak growth caused by iron deficiency. Your grandpa sometimes dropped a few nails into watering cans for a week, letting the water absorb trace minerals before using it on crops like roses, hydrangeas, or spinach. This gentle infusion strengthened leaf color and overall vigor. The trick worked especially well in slightly alkaline soils where iron availability was low. Unlike store-bought supplements, the release from rusted metal was gradual and balanced, giving steady nourishment over time. Some gardeners even strung rusty nails inside clay pots to ensure consistent contact with moisture. It was recycling at its best, turning scrap metal into plant medicine. The slow, natural chemistry kept gardens greener without spending a penny on industrial iron tonics. Cardboard weed barrier. Before commercial weed mats, gardeners used flattened cardboard boxes to smother unwanted growth. Layers of cardboard laid over bare soil stopped sunlight from reaching weed roots, halting germination naturally. Your grandparents often spread it between vegetable rows, covering it with straw or compost to keep it in place. As the cardboard softened, it attracted earthworms that broke it down into rich humus, improving soil texture in the process. It was biodegradable, cheap, and incredibly effective. The barrier also held moisture underneath, reducing watering needs during dry spells. In time, the buried layer vanished completely, leaving a clean, fertile bed ready for the next crop. It was common to see old cereal or shipping boxes repurposed this way in thrifty gardens. Modern mulching fabrics may look fancier, but cardboard achieved the same results decades earlier using nothing but patience, recycling, and a solid understanding of how the soil breathes and heals. Cornmeal fungus control. Cornmeal turned out to be more than a pantry staple. It doubled as a natural antifungal treatment in gardens. Sprinkled lightly over damp soil, it encouraged beneficial microbes that suppressed harmful fungi such as root rot or damping off disease. Your grandpa learned that dusting cornmeal around the base of tomatoes, peppers, or squash helped keep fungal spots at bay during humid seasons. It worked not because it killed fungi directly, but because it shifted the soil's microbial balance toward the good kind. Mixed into compost, it sped up decomposition too, feeding earthworms while reducing sour smells. Some gardeners even brewed a cornmeal tea, soaking it overnight before pouring it over affected patches. This simple solution revived struggling plants without chemicals or complicated formulas. It was an early example of biological gardening, using one living thing to keep another in check. From leftover pantry grain came a quiet but powerful cure for garden disease. Eggshell seed starters. Eggshells provided an ingenious solution for starting seedlings. Cracked in half, cleaned, and filled with soil, they made natural little pots. Seeds germinated inside, benefiting from the calcium-rich shell that slowly leached nutrients as it broke down. Once seedlings were ready, the whole shell could be planted directly in the ground, eliminating transplant shock. Your grandma sometimes pricked a small hole at the base of each shell to improve drainage, ensuring the young roots never sat in soggy soil. Eggshells were free, biodegradable, and the perfect size for early sprouts of herbs, tomatoes, or peppers. They also reduced waste in the kitchen, turning breakfast leftovers into garden assets. By the time the seedlings established themselves outdoors, the shells were already softening, adding extra calcium into the soil. Cloche plant protection. Cloches were used to shield tender plants from frost and biting winds. Made from glass domes, cut bottles, or even bent wire with cloth stretched across, they acted like mini greenhouses. They trapped warmth during the day and held it overnight, protecting seedlings during the unpredictable weeks of early spring. Your grandparents often improvised with old jam jars placed over seedlings, a simple solution that cost nothing. This not only kept young plants warm, but also deterred pests, such as birds, from plucking at delicate shoots. Cloches allowed crops to be sown earlier than usual, extending the growing season and giving gardeners a head start. As the plants outgrew their covers, cloches were lifted and reused on the next row. It was a flexible method that balanced thrift with effectiveness, proving that simple, recycled materials could save entire crops from a late frost. Yeast growth stimulant. Baker's yeast was more than a kitchen essential. It became a secret weapon for plant growth. When dissolved in warm water with a spoon of sugar, the yeast produced carbon dioxide and micronutrients that invigorated soil microbes. Your grandpa poured this frothy mix at the base of vegetable seedlings once a month to trigger faster root and leaf growth. The reaction boosted beneficial bacteria underground, improving nutrient absorption naturally. Yeast also released trace amounts of B vitamins that help plants recover from stress, especially after transplanting. Unlike chemical boosters, it gave a gentle, sustained push instead of a quick surge. The scent faded quickly, but the effects lasted for weeks. Modern gardeners call it a biostimulant, yet it was just bread yeast all along, borrowed from the pantry and turned into a simple growth tonic. For tired soil and struggling plants, that bubbly kitchen brew brought them right back to life. Honey rooting solution. Honey's antibacterial and antifungal properties made it an ideal natural rooting aid. When Grandpa took cuttings from herbs, roses, or fruit bushes, he'd dip the fresh ends into raw honey before placing them in soil. The sticky layer sealed the wound, preventing infection while stimulating new root cells to form. Mixed with a bit of warm water, honey also worked as a mild feeding solution, encouraging early root development. Its trace minerals and sugars nourished the cutting through those delicate first days. Many gardeners noticed that honey-treated cuttings rooted faster and stronger than untreated ones without relying on synthetic rooting powders. Your grandma even used honey water for reviving wilted plants, soaking the stems overnight before replanting. Seaweed. Garden feed. Living near the coast meant one thing: free fertilizer washing ashore. Dried seaweed became a prized source of minerals like potassium, magnesium, and iodine. Your grandparents collected it after tides receded, rinsed off the salt, and laid it over garden beds as mulch. As it decomposed, it fed the soil with trace nutrients that boosted growth and improved flavor in vegetables. The natural gel in seaweed also helped retain moisture, acting almost like a primitive hydrogel. When brewed into liquid feed, it created a concentrated plant tonic used sparingly on seedlings or flowers. Seaweed-fed crops often developed thicker stems and deeper color, showing its power as a natural growth enhancer. Today's bottled kelp fertilizers are fancy versions of what seaside families did for centuries. Each piece of seaweed dragged from the shore meant richer soil, stronger crops, and a connection between ocean life and the backyard harvest. Onion peel insect spray. The papery skins of onions, normally tossed aside, were used as a homemade pest repellent. Your grandma collected them in jars, soaked them in water for a few days, and strained the amber liquid into a spray bottle. This infusion, rich in sulfur compounds, drove away aphids, thrips, and caterpillars that plagued vegetables. Sprayed directly on leaves, it formed a mild protective scent barrier that bugs disliked, but plants tolerated well. It also left behind trace nutrients that strengthened foliage. When combined with garlic skins or chili flakes, the brew became even more potent. The mix worked wonders on leafy greens and flowers without damaging pollinators. It smelled strong at first, but quickly faded in the sun, leaving only healthy, untouched leaves behind. Store-bought insecticides promised the same result, but this old kitchen trick proved that every peel had purpose, even after the soup pot was full. Clove Oil Pest Deterrent. Clove oil's powerful scent made it a favorite for keeping pests at bay. A few drops mixed with water and a splash of soap formed a natural deterrent against ants, aphids, and even fungal spores. Your grandpa often wiped greenhouse shelves and pot edges with the mixture to stop insects from nesting. When sprayed lightly on plants, it created a fragrant shield without harming bees or butterflies. The eugenol in clove oil acted as both an antiseptic and a repellent, keeping soft-bodied insects from feeding. It also protected stored bulbs and seeds from mold during the damp season. The same oil used for toothaches became a quiet ally in the garden, proving that one bottle could serve both medicine and soil. While modern sprays boast chemical complexity, the sharp, spicy aroma of clove oil handled invaders the old-fashioned way, firmly, safely, and with the scent of nature itself. Marigolds for pests? Marigolds weren't just colorful additions to garden rows, they acted as natural defenders. Their scent repelled pests such as aphids, whiteflies, and even nematodes lurking in the soil. Rows of marigolds planted around vegetables created a living barrier, reducing infestations without chemicals. Your grandparents often tucked marigolds between tomato plants, where their smell distracted whiteflies and protected the crop. Beyond repelling pests, the flowers also attracted beneficial insects like ladybirds and hoverflies, which hunted down aphids and other sapsuckers. Gardeners soon noticed that planting marigolds boosted overall crop health while adding a splash of color to the patch. Deadheading the flowers encouraged even more blooms, extending their usefulness through the season. Harvest decoy plants. Decoy planting involved growing sacrificial crops to draw pests away from valuable harvests. Certain plants were chosen because they attracted insects more strongly than the main crop. Nasturtiums, for example, lured aphids away from beans, while mustard often drew flea beetles away from cabbages. Your grandpa sometimes planted a patch of radishes near his cucumbers, knowing flea beetles would attack them first and spare the cucumbers. The decoys acted as traps, giving gardeners time to save their main vegetables. Once the decoys were heavily infested, they could be pulled and destroyed, taking the pests with them. This method reduced reliance on sprays while protecting food crops from serious damage. It was a strategy that demanded planning but cost almost nothing to implement. Weed control tactics. Weed management was an ongoing battle, and several clever methods were used to stay ahead. Mulching with straw, leaves, or newspaper suppressed weed growth while keeping soil moist. Hoeing regularly at the seedling stage was another key tactic, preventing weeds from establishing deep roots. Your grandma often poured boiling water on weeds sprouting between paving stones, a quick fix that left soil intact but killed unwanted growth. In larger plots, spacing crops closer together reduced room for weeds to emerge. Deep-rooted perennials like dock or thistle were dug out entirely to prevent regrowth. The combination of physical removal, mulching, and clever planting meant weeds were managed effectively without relying on store-bought chemicals. Each approach chipped away at the problem, making the workload lighter over time. By combining these simple tricks, gardens stayed productive while weeds were kept firmly under control. Urine fertilizer pots. One of the simplest nutrient sources was surprisingly human, urine. Collected in clay or metal pots, it was diluted with water before being poured at the base of plants. Rich in nitrogen, it gave leafy vegetables like cabbages and spinach a fast growth boost. Your grandparents often let the pots sit for a few days before using, since aged urine lost its harsh edge and smelled less. Mixed at a ratio of about 10 parts water to 1 part urine, it delivered nutrition without burning roots. It was never splashed on edible leaves, only around the soil, to avoid contamination. In tough times, this free fertilizer kept gardens thriving when shop-bought alternatives were too costly or unavailable. Even now, the idea of recycling waste into plant feed is recognized as sustainable, but for earlier generations, it was simply practical chemistry put to everyday use. Molasses soil feed. Molasses, a byproduct of sugar making, became a favorite soil booster. When mixed with water, it fed beneficial microbes underground, encouraging them to break down organic matter more efficiently. This improved soil fertility and boosted plant growth naturally. Your grandpa sometimes added molasses to compost piles too, where it sped decomposition and cut down smells. In the garden bed, diluted molasses also improved plant resilience against pests, as healthier soil meant stronger crops. Some gardeners combined it with liquid manures, creating a nutrient-rich tea that both fertilized and revived tired soil. The sugars worked as an energy source, making the underground ecosystem more active. With little cost and minimal effort. Seed fermentation trick. Seeds from fruits like tomatoes and cucumbers germinated more reliably when fermented before planting. The process involved placing the seeds in water for a few days, letting the pulp and gel coating break down naturally. Once rinsed and dried, the seeds stored better and sprouted more evenly. Your grandparents often left jars of tomato seeds on the windowsill, stirring them daily until the slimy coating dissolved, then drying them on paper for the next season. Fermentation also killed some seed-borne diseases, giving young plants a healthier start. Without this step, many seeds rotted in the soil instead of sprouting. It was a low-effort task that paid off at planting time, ensuring stronger, more consistent crops. Even now, experienced gardeners rely on fermentation for heirloom seed saving. Bug barrier method. Keeping insects away often meant creating physical defenses. Barriers such as fine mesh nets, row covers, or grease bands around tree trunks stopped pests from reaching crops. Even improvised materials worked. Old cloth, net curtains, or paper collars around seedlings kept invaders at bay. Your grandpa sometimes smeared sticky resin on tree trunks, trapping crawling insects before they reached the fruit. These barriers weren't poisons, but obstacles, forcing pests to look elsewhere. Lightweight mesh kept cabbage white butterflies from laying eggs, while collars around young stems stopped cutworms from chewing through them overnight. The approach was simple: prevent the pest from touching the plant in the first place. By combining barriers with crop rotation and healthy soil, infestations dropped dramatically. Long before chemical sprays were common, physical protection was the first line of defense, and it remains one of the most effective methods for home gardeners today. Polyculture strip crops. Polyculture involved mixing different plants together in strips rather than planting large blocks of the same crop. This variety made it harder for pests and diseases to spread and kept soil nutrients in balance. For example, strips of beans fixed nitrogen that fed nearby corn, while squash shaded the ground and reduced weeds. Your grandma often alternated tall and short crops, ensuring sunlight reached everything evenly while creating natural windbreaks. By staggering harvest times, the garden produced food steadily instead of all at once. Polyculture also encouraged beneficial insects, as flowers mixed with vegetables offered nectar throughout the season. Unlike monoculture, which exhausted soil quickly, strip planting maintained fertility and kept the ground covered. It was a practical way to make small plots more productive and resilient. Chicken garden helpers. Chickens played a double role in the garden: pest control and soil enrichment. Allowed to roam in controlled areas, they scratched up insects like beetles, grubs, and slugs that damaged crops. Their constant digging also loosened soil, making it more workable for planting. Your grandparents often rotated chickens through empty beds after harvest, letting them clear debris while fertilizing with droppings rich in nitrogen. The trick was to move them regularly so they didn't over-scratch or compact the soil. Chickens could also be penned over compost piles, where they sped decomposition by mixing scraps while feeding themselves. This natural cleanup crew saved time and reduced pests without sprays. It was a low-cost system that turned poultry into part of the gardening routine, keeping beds healthier and more productive. Weed Scratcher Tool. One of the simplest implements for weed control was the handheld scratcher, a tool designed to slice just below the soil surface. It cut young weeds at the root line before they grew large enough to compete with crops. Your grandpa often sharpened his scratcher blade himself, keeping it ready for quick passes between rows. Unlike hoes that turned the soil too deeply, scratchers disturbed only the top layer, leaving moisture intact and soil structure undamaged. They were light, efficient, and perfect for daily maintenance. Regular use prevented weeds from ever becoming established, which saved hours of heavy digging later. Because the tool was so easy to handle, it could be used even in tight rows or around delicate plants. For small gardens, this little invention kept weeding manageable without exhausting labor. Three Sisters. Planting. The classic Three Sisters method combined corn, beans, and squash in a cooperative system. Corn provided tall stalks for climbing beans, beans fixed nitrogen into the soil, and squash spread broadleaves that shaded out weeds. This trio created a balanced ecosystem where each crop supported the others. Your grandma often tucked in a few sunflowers at the row ends, giving additional support and attracting pollinators. Together, these plants thrived in ways they couldn't alone, maximizing yield in the same space. The method also extended harvests, with corn maturing later while beans and squash provided earlier food. By covering the ground, squash reduced moisture loss and protected soil health. Passed down through generations, the Three Sisters showed how thoughtful planting could transform limited land into a sustainable food source. Ridge and furrow plowing. Traditional ridge and furrow plowing shaped fields into raised ridges separated by low furrows. The ridges improved drainage on heavy soils, while the furrows captured water in dry conditions. This simple system balanced moisture and reduced crop failures. Your grandparents often sowed potatoes on the ridges, where they stayed drier, while beans thrived in the moisture of the furrows. The method required steady maintenance, as ridges were reformed each season, but it allowed planting in land that otherwise would have stayed boggy. Over time, the pattern also enriched soil structure by directing organic matter and rainfall where it was most useful. Though large-scale farming has shifted to flat planting, Small-scale gardeners still use modified ridge systems for root vegetables and other crops sensitive to waterlogging. Baking soda barrier. Baking soda became a cheap, reliable aid against fungal diseases. A light dusting around the base of plants or a diluted spray helped prevent powdery mildew from spreading on leaves. The alkaline nature of the soda created an environment where fungi struggled to thrive. Your grandpa sometimes mixed baking soda with a drop of soap to make the spray stick better to leaf surfaces, ensuring full coverage. This home remedy worked best as a preventative, applied before mildew became severe. It was especially effective on cucumbers, squash, and grapes, which were often plagued by the disease. Because it was safe and inexpensive, gardeners could apply it regularly without worry of harming soil or wildlife. Long before commercial fungicides were available on shelves, households turned to baking soda as their first defense, proving that simple pantry staples carried surprising power in the garden. Wheel Soil Cultivator. The wheel cultivator was designed to loosen soil and uproot weeds with efficiency. Its single or double wheel frame carried a set of sharp tines or blades that sliced through the top layer of soil as it rolled. Gardeners used it to prepare seed beds quickly and to aerate compacted earth without deep digging. Your grandpa often adjusted the tine depth depending on whether he was working soft vegetable rows or tougher ground. By pushing steadily up and down the paths, he could clear weeds in wide strips far faster than with a hand hoe. The cultivator also mixed in surface mulch or compost, ensuring nutrients spread evenly across the bed. Lightweight compared to heavy plows, it suited small plots where precision mattered. Families often shared one between neighbors, repairing and sharpening it season after season. With simple mechanics and dependable results, the wheel cultivator became a favorite for maintaining productive gardens. Moon phase planting. Moon phase planting followed the belief that lunar cycles influenced plant growth. The waxing moon, when light increased, was considered the best time to sow leafy crops and cereals. The waning moon, as light decreased, was reserved for root crops and perennials. Your grandma often consulted a handwritten calendar to decide when beans should be sown or potatoes planted, aligning with the rising or falling moon. While modern science debates the effects, gardeners noticed consistent patterns in germination and vigor when timing was respected. The practice also tied into natural rhythms, encouraging observation of the sky alongside the soil. Lunar planting calendars circulated widely, and many households swore by them for better yields. Beyond superstition, the method structured planting schedules and helped spread labor evenly across the month. Root division method. Root division allowed gardeners to multiply perennial plants without seeds. Clumps of rhubarb, chives, or hostas were dug up, split into smaller sections with roots intact, and replanted to grow as new individuals. This rejuvenated older plants that had become crowded and less productive. Your grandparents often timed the task for early spring, using a sharp spade to slice divisions cleanly before growth resumed. Each section carried enough stored energy to establish quickly, ensuring survival and strong regrowth. Root division kept beds orderly while expanding stock at no cost. Some divisions were shared with neighbors, spreading varieties across the community. The technique also helped control plant size, preventing aggressive perennials from overtaking space. Divided plants frequently outperformed older ones, producing fresher growth and higher yields. It was a reliable, straightforward method that made the most of existing resources, turning one plant into many without needing seed or purchase. Trash can composting. A simple trash can could be turned into an effective composter. Holes were drilled along the sides and bottom to allow air circulation and drainage. Kitchen scraps, grass clippings, and leaves were layered inside, breaking down into nutrient-rich compost over weeks. Your grandpa sometimes rolled the can on its side to mix the contents, speeding decomposition without a fork or shovel. The lid kept pests out and moisture in, making it ideal for small gardens or urban backyards. As the material broke down, heat built up inside the can, accelerating the process. Finished compost was scooped from the bottom, while fresh scraps continued to feed the pile on top. This system required little space and produced a steady supply of organic matter to enrich beds. It was a tidy, manageable approach that allowed families to recycle waste and maintain fertility without a large compost heap. Nettle Tea Feed. Nettles, often considered weeds, were used to brew a powerful liquid fertilizer. Fresh nettles were packed into a barrel, covered with water, and left to ferment for a couple of weeks. The result was a dark, nutrient-rich liquid that boosted plant growth when diluted and poured at the base of crops. Your grandma stirred her nettle barrel daily, releasing bubbles and ensuring even breakdown. The tea was especially valued for its nitrogen content, which fueled leafy vegetables like spinach and cabbage. Though pungent, it was safe, effective, and entirely free. Strained leaves from the brew were returned to the compost heap, adding further value. The feed was applied throughout the growing season, especially during critical growth stages. Gardeners prized it for its visible results. Plants grew lusher, darker, and stronger after each application. With only weeds and water required, nettle tea turned a nuisance plant into an asset. Strategic garden shade. Creating shade in the right places helped protect tender crops from scorching heat. Tall plants such as corn or sunflowers were positioned to cast cooling shadows over lettuces or herbs prone to bolting. Canvas sheets, wooden frames, or woven mats also provided adjustable cover during peak sun hours. Your grandparents sometimes used old burlap sacks stretched on sticks to shield delicate seedlings until they established roots. Shade kept soil moisture higher and prevented young plants from wilting during hot spells. It also extended the growing season for leafy greens, which preferred cooler conditions. By arranging crops thoughtfully, one planting sheltered another, maximizing productivity in small spaces. Shade cloths, when available, offered a more durable solution, but improvised covers worked just as well. The practice required observation of sun paths across the garden and careful planning of rows, ensuring each crop received enough light while avoiding damaging excess heat. Epsom Salt Boost. Epsom salt, a natural source of magnesium sulfate, was commonly used to correct nutrient deficiencies. Plants lacking magnesium often showed yellowing leaves with green veins, a condition quickly remedied by dissolving a tablespoon of Epsom salt in a gallon of water and applying it as a foliar spray or soil drench. Your grandma kept a tin in the shed, using it on tomatoes and peppers when their growth slowed. It also encouraged stronger root development in seedlings and boosted chlorophyll production for healthier foliage. Applied during flowering, Epsom salt supported better fruit set, particularly in crops demanding extra magnesium. Gardeners applied it sparingly to avoid salt buildup, often alternating with compost feeds. It was inexpensive, widely available, and effective, making it a regular addition to garden care routines. Seed storage ideas. Storing seeds properly was essential for ensuring strong germination in the next season. Seeds were kept cool, dark, and dry, often inside glass jars, paper packets, or cloth bags. Silica packets or rice grains were added to absorb moisture and prevent mold. Your grandparents sometimes tucked their seed jars into old biscuit tins, labeling each carefully with variety and date. Proper storage extended viability for years, reducing the need to buy fresh supplies. Larger seeds like beans and peas were particularly easy to save this way, while smaller seeds were carefully folded into paper packets before being grouped by crop. Seasonal rotation of stored seeds maintained vigor, ensuring that none were kept too long. Careful organization turned simple household containers into reliable seed banks. Weather adaptation tips. Changing weather required flexible strategies to protect crops. Raised beds help plants survive heavy rainfall by improving drainage, while mulch conserved moisture during dry spells. Temporary shelters like tarps or row covers protected vegetables from unexpected frosts or hail. Your grandpa watched for shifts in wind direction and cloud patterns, adjusting his plans accordingly. Crops were staggered in planting to ensure that if one batch was lost to weather, another could still mature. Deep-rooted vegetables such as carrots were paired with shallow-rooted ones like lettuce, balancing soil use and reducing losses in extremes. Gardens that adapted quickly to changing conditions stayed productive despite unpredictable seasons. Charcoal soil amendment. Charcoal, often produced from firewood, enriched soil by improving aeration and water retention. Crushed into small pieces, it was mixed into beds where it absorbed nutrients and released them slowly back to plants. This reduced fertilizer loss and made soil more resilient. Your grandma sometimes added a sprinkle of wood ash with the charcoal, combining minerals with the porous structure. In tropical regions, this technique resembled biochar, known for boosting soil productivity for generations. Charcoal also reduced soil acidity when used in moderation. Its lightweight, porous texture created habitats for beneficial microbes, making the ground more biologically active. Families who heated with wood often repurposed charcoal from stoves, ensuring nothing was wasted. Companion animal grazing. Animals were integrated into gardening systems to manage vegetation and pests. Ducks patrolled plots to eat slugs, sheep grazed pathways to control grass, and rabbits contributed manure for fertilization. Your grandparents often penned goats near fallow beds, letting them clear brush before plowing. This reduced the need for manual labor and recycled nutrients directly into the soil. Careful rotation kept animals from overgrazing and damaging crops. Chickens, ducks, and even pigs were assigned to specific tasks, each playing a role in maintaining balance. By matching livestock habits with garden needs, households created a cycle where food and fertilizer worked hand in hand. Fermented food storage. Fermentation was a method of extending harvests without refrigeration. Vegetables such as cabbage, cucumbers, and carrots were submerged in brine and allowed to ferment, producing lactic acid that preserved them for months. Your grandma often layered shredded cabbage with salt in large crocks, pressing it down with a stone to make sauerkraut. This process kept food safe, added tangy flavors, and maintained nutrition through the winter. The method required only salt, water, and clean containers, making it accessible to every household. Fermentation not only prevented waste, but also diversified diets with probiotic-rich foods. Moldboard Plow Use. The moldboard plow was built to turn over heavy soil, burying weeds and crop residues while exposing fresh layers for planting. Its curved blade lifted and flipped the earth, creating clean furrows that prepared the ground for seed. Your grandpa often hitched the plow behind a mule, guiding steady lines that transformed rough fields into workable beds. This inversion not only suppressed weeds, but also incorporated organic matter deeply into the soil. While labor-intensive, the method created a fine tilth that supported strong root systems. In clay soils especially, the moldboard plow was valued for breaking compaction. The plow had to be kept sharp and properly angled to avoid clogging. After each pass, adjustments were made depending on soil conditions, ensuring consistency across the field. The tool was central in both small farms and larger holdings, making seasonal planting possible on land that otherwise would have been too hard or weedy. Dew water collection. Morning dew offered a hidden water source that gardeners learned to harness. Plants naturally collected droplets on their leaves, but cloths or nets were sometimes stretched nearby to gather more. These cloths were wrung out into watering cans, providing small but useful amounts of moisture during dry spells. Your grandma occasionally spread sheets over crops at night, then collected the dew that formed by sunrise to water delicate seedlings. Dew was especially important in regions where rainfall was scarce, adding a supplement when no other source was available. Shallow basins lined with stone also encouraged condensation, channeling drops toward plant roots. While the quantities weren't large, every bit mattered in times of drought. Gardeners who rose early enough to collect it found that dew could sustain young or thirsty plants until heavier waterings were possible. The practice demonstrated how observation of natural cycles helped keep crops alive through lean conditions. Fish emulsion feed. Fish waste became a potent fertilizer when converted into emulsion. Scraps, heads, and bones were soaked in water and left to break down, producing a liquid high in nitrogen, phosphorus, and trace minerals. Diluted before application, it was poured at the base of crops to spur vigorous growth. Your grandparents often mixed fish emulsion into irrigation cans, feeding tomatoes and corn with a strong nutritional boost. The smell was strong, but the results were undeniable. Plants developed deeper color and stronger stems. This feed also enriched soil microbes, making the underground ecosystem more active. In coastal areas, fishermen traded fish waste to farmers who turned it into valuable garden input. The process was simple but effective, taking what would otherwise rot and turning it into liquid food. Careful handling ensured the right balance, preventing over-fertilization. Duck rice system. In wetland farming, ducks were released into flooded rice paddies to act as helpers. They ate insects, weeds, and small pests while stirring up the water, oxygenating the soil and benefiting the crop. Their droppings added natural fertilizer, enriching the paddy with nutrients. Your grandma told of families who carefully timed the release of ducks, letting them work fields during early growth stages before withdrawing them at harvest. This reduced the need for herbicides or pesticides, making rice cultivation cleaner and more efficient. The ducks kept weeds in check while saving farmers the labor of hand-pulling. At the same time, ducks themselves grew healthy on the diet of pests and weeds, adding food value later. The cycle linked animal and plant life seamlessly, conserving effort while boosting yields. The system thrived in many Asian regions, proving to be both practical and sustainable. It created balance between farming needs and natural processes. Tree grafting trick. Grafting was used to combine the strengths of two plants into one. A hardy rootstock was joined with a branch from a productive variety, allowing the grafted tree to inherit durability from one and fruit quality from the other. Gardeners carefully matched cambium layers so the tissues fused as they healed. Your grandpa often sharpened a penknife for this job, making a clean diagonal cut before binding the graft with cloth or wax. Apples, pears, and plums were common subjects, with grafting producing reliable harvests faster than growing from seed. It also allowed multiple varieties to grow on a single tree, saving space in small plots. When successful, the graft sealed over time, creating a permanent union. Grafting demanded steady hands and practice, but once mastered, it became a powerful way to ensure strong orchards. Cutting propagation. Propagation through cuttings allowed gardeners to multiply plants without seeds. A healthy stem was cut just below a node, stripped of lower leaves, and placed in water or soil until roots formed. Moisture and warmth were essential during this early stage. Your grandparents sometimes dipped cuttings in wood ash to discourage rot before planting, a small adjustment that improved survival rates. Herbs like mint and basil, as well as shrubs such as currants, were commonly propagated this way. Rooting often took only a few weeks, after which the young plants could be transferred to permanent beds. Cuttings preserved the exact traits of the parent plant, making them valuable for maintaining flavor, color, or hardiness. With simple tools and care, a single plant could provide dozens of new ones. This method kept household gardens expanding at no cost, ensuring a steady supply of both food crops and ornamentals. Solar food dehydrator. Sunlight became a natural preservation tool when directed through solar dehydrators. These devices used sloped panels or boxes with clear covers to trap heat and airflow, drying fruits, vegetables, and herbs over several days. The process reduced moisture, preventing spoilage while locking in nutrients. Your grandpa built a simple frame from scrap wood and glass, laying trays inside where apple slices and beans dried evenly. Ventilation was key, allowing moisture to escape while keeping temperatures warm. Dried food was stored in jars or cloth bags, lasting months without refrigeration. This technique ensured nothing from the harvest went to waste, particularly in summers with bumper crops. Lightweight and portable, solar dehydrators turned excess produce into winter reserves. Herbs like mint, thyme, and oregano held flavor especially well, remaining useful long after the growing season ended. Wood ash fertilizer. Wood ash collected from hearths and stoves supplied gardens with potassium and calcium. Sprinkled lightly over beds, it balanced acidic soils and improved crop health. Root vegetables like carrots and beets benefited from its mineral content. Your grandma sometimes sifted the ash to remove large charcoal pieces before scattering it, ensuring even application. Care had to be taken not to overuse it, as too much raised soil pH excessively. Mixed into compost piles, ash enriched the final product with trace elements. It also discouraged slugs when spread around tender seedlings, doubling as a protective barrier. Farmers valued ash for its availability. It was produced daily from cooking fires and heating stoves. Applied correctly, it boosted fertility at no cost, turning household waste into a steady soil amendment. Zone-based gardening. Gardens were often organized into zones based on use and accessibility. Closest to the home, intensive crops such as herbs and salad greens were planted for quick harvesting. Farther out, larger vegetables and orchards occupied space, while grazing or less tended plots spread at the edges. Your grandpa often kept his watering cans and tools near Zone 1, reducing trips and saving effort. By grouping plants with similar needs, watering and care could be done efficiently. Compost heaps, chicken coops, or sheds were placed strategically so nutrients and labor circulated through the garden. This system was especially useful on small farms where every movement counted toward conserving time. Zone-based planning also improved yields by ensuring crops received the right attention at the right distance. Wattle fence building. Wattle fencing was built by weaving thin branches or twigs between upright stakes to form barriers. Flexible wood such as hazel, willow, or young ash was cut fresh so it bent without breaking. Once woven tightly, the fence held animals out and marked boundaries while also breaking wind across the garden. Your grandparents often cut willow shoots after pruning and set them aside specifically for weaving, making sure they were uniform in thickness. These fences were durable when maintained, with repairs easily made by replacing worn branches. Wattle also supported climbing crops like beans or peas, acting as both fence and trellis. Because it was made from renewable materials, it cost nothing beyond labor. Families often built sections together, creating panels that could be moved as needed. Wattle fencing added structure to gardens, controlled livestock, and served practical purposes in crop protection. Kiwi seed planting. Kiwi seeds sprouted readily when cleaned and planted fresh. The seeds were separated from fruit pulp, rinsed and dried slightly before sowing into moist soil. With warmth and light, germination began within a few weeks. Your grandma often placed the seeds between damp paper before planting, improving success by encouraging sprouting first. Kiwi plants thrived in sunny spots with good drainage, but they needed support structures such as trellises as vines developed. Because seed-grown plants varied in fruit quality, many were later grafted with known varieties to improve harvests. Even when the resulting vines produced little fruit, they created vigorous greenery that shaded arbors and fences. Patience was necessary, as kiwis often took years to bear fruit, but their strong climbing nature made them valuable as ornamental cover. Terrace farming system. Terrace farming carved steps into sloped land, preventing soil erosion and making the ground suitable for crops. Each level created a flat bed that captured rainfall and slowed water runoff. Stone or wooden barriers reinforced the edges, holding soil in place. Your grandpa worked terraces on hillsides where plowing would otherwise wash soil downhill, planting grains or vegetables in neatly leveled strips. Terraces improved water use by allowing infiltration rather than loss, ensuring crops received consistent moisture. They also expanded usable land in hilly regions where flat plots were scarce. Maintenance required regular repairs to walls and drainage channels, but the benefits outweighed the effort. Families farming on slopes depended on terraces for reliable yields, and the system remains visible in landscapes around the world. Wood chip mulch. Wood chips spread over soil created a protective mulch that retained moisture, suppressed weeds, and improved soil structure as it decayed. The chips came from pruned branches or sawmill waste, turning byproducts into garden assets. A thick layer reduced surface evaporation during summer and cushioned the soil from heavy rain. Your grandparents often spread chips around fruit trees, which thrived from cooler roots and fewer weeds. Over time, the chips decomposed into humus, enriching the soil with organic matter. Mulching also protected earthworms and other beneficial organisms, keeping soil life active. The practice reduced the need for constant weeding and watering, freeing labor for other tasks. Wood chips were available at little or no cost, especially when collected from cut branches after trimming. Their slow breakdown meant mulch stayed effective for months. Coal ash use. Coal ash left over from stoves and fires was spread carefully across certain crops to adjust soil texture. It contained trace minerals but was used sparingly to avoid toxic buildup. Ash improved drainage in heavy soils, lightening dense ground where root crops struggled. Your grandma often sprinkled it along garden paths, where it hardened the surface and reduced mud in wet seasons. In vegetable beds, coal ash was mixed thinly into topsoil or scattered lightly, never in concentrated amounts. Potatoes and carrots benefited most when applied in moderation, as the ash reduced acidity slightly and supported cleaner growth. Some households also used it to deter slugs, creating rough barriers they avoided crossing. Handling coal ash required care, but it gave use to a byproduct that otherwise piled up. Families with coal stoves considered it another free amendment that supported both soil condition and pest management. Garlic soil. Soaking. Garlic cloves soaked before planting gained a stronger start. The cloves were placed in water or diluted compost tea for several hours, softening their skins and boosting germination. Your grandpa sometimes added a pinch of baking soda or wood ash to the soak, discouraging fungal problems on the developing roots. Once planted, the cloves established more quickly, sending up vigorous shoots ahead of untreated ones. This method was particularly helpful in damp soils where rot posed a risk. Soaked garlic often produced bulbs with better uniformity and stronger flavor. By preparing the cloves before sowing, gardeners gave crops a head start without chemicals. The soaking process required little effort but delivered noticeable results in the harvest. It became a reliable step for families aiming to improve yield and reduce losses. Newspaper mulching. Newspapers, once read, became shields for the soil. Sheets were laid flat across beds, then covered with a thin layer of straw or compost to hold them down. This barrier smothered weeds, conserved soil moisture, and broke down slowly into organic matter. Your grandparents often dipped the papers in water before spreading them, knowing the dampness made them cling tighter to the ground and resist wind. The layering was especially useful for large vegetable rows, where weeds otherwise consume time and effort. Newspaper mulch also moderated soil temperature, keeping it cooler in summer and warmer in early spring. Earthworms thrived beneath the cover, pulling softened paper into the soil as it decayed. Over months, the mulch disappeared, leaving enriched ground ready for the next crop. With stacks of old papers always on hand, the method cost nothing and turned household waste into a useful garden input, reducing both work and waste. Aloe water propagation. Aloe vera leaves provided a gel rich in nutrients and natural rooting hormones. Cuttings dipped into aloe juice rooted faster, gaining protection against disease. Some gardeners also placed cuttings directly into jars of water mixed with a small slice of aloe leaf. Your grandpa often bruised the leaf slightly before soaking, releasing more gel into the water and giving the cuttings a better chance to survive. The gel's antibacterial properties reduced rot while encouraging new root growth. This was especially effective for herbs, houseplants, and soft-stemmed crops. Once roots appeared, the cuttings were transplanted into soil where they continued to grow strongly. Aloe's dual role as healer for skin and booster for plants made it a household staple. Urn seed storage. Seeds stored in urns or clay jars stayed viable for long periods when sealed against moisture and pests. Containers were often buried or kept in cool cellars to maintain stable temperatures. Your grandma lined the urns with dry ash before filling them, knowing it absorbed humidity and kept seeds from molding. The wide mouths were sealed with wax or cloth, creating airtight chambers that preserved grains, beans, or vegetable seeds. Families could rely on these seed stores for planting across multiple years, reducing dependence on merchants. In villages, urns often held community seed stock, ensuring no household lacked planting material after a poor harvest. The method protected genetic diversity by saving multiple varieties in secure, dry conditions. Even without refrigeration, seeds kept their germination power thanks to this simple system. Bone meal fertilizer. Bones from livestock or kitchen waste were repurposed as a rich source of phosphorus and calcium. They were cleaned, dried, and crushed into fine powder before being worked into the soil. This slow-release fertilizer strengthened root systems and supported flower and fruit development. Your grandparents sometimes charred the bones first in a fire, making them brittle and easier to grind into meal. Spread around root crops or mixed into planting holes for trees, bone meal provided steady nutrition over months. Its use reduced reliance on purchased fertilizers, ensuring productivity even in poor soils. Though strong in effect, it needed careful balance, as too much could disrupt soil chemistry. For households raising animals, bone meal offered a way to recycle waste into something directly beneficial to the garden. Year-round planting guide. A year-round planting calendar allowed households to stagger crops for continuous harvest. Each month had its assigned tasks: sowing in early spring, transplanting in late spring, harvesting in summer, and preparing beds for autumn crops. Winter was reserved for planting and indoor sowing. Your grandpa often penciled notes into a wall calendar, adjusting sowing times based on local frost dates and past experience. These records guided him in planting spinach early or holding back beans until the soil warmed properly. By organizing work in a cycle, the garden stayed productive without gaps. Different varieties of the same crop were sown in succession, spreading the harvest across weeks. The system relied on observation and timing more than equipment, ensuring that fresh food was available in every season. Generational knowledge refined these calendars, with each year's notes improving the next. Milk spray cure. Milk, diluted with water, was sprayed onto plants to combat powdery mildew and other fungal diseases. Proteins in the milk altered leaf surfaces, making them less hospitable for fungal spores. A common mix was 1 part milk to 9 parts water, applied weekly during outbreaks. Your grandma often added a pinch of baking soda to the spray, increasing its effectiveness and helping it stick to the leaves. This mixture worked especially well on cucumbers, squash, and grapes, which were prone to mildew in humid weather. The spray needed reapplying after rain, but it was safe, cheap, and easy to prepare. Unlike harsh fungicides, milk spray posed no risk to beneficial insects or soil health. Gardeners valued its accessibility. Milk was available in nearly every home, making treatment possible at a moment's notice. Irrigation canal system. Irrigation canals were dug to guide water from streams or wells into fields. Small ditches branched from the main channel, carrying water directly to rows of crops. The system ensured even distribution and prevented both flooding and drought in garden beds. Your grandpa often added shallow overflow ditches alongside the canals, giving excess water somewhere to run instead of drowning the plants. This improvement reduced soil erosion and protected fragile seedlings during heavy flows. Maintenance was constant, as channels had to be cleared of silt and weeds to keep water moving. Canals transformed dry ground into fertile land by making moisture available exactly where it was needed. In regions with erratic rainfall, they became the backbone of productive gardens. Even on a small scale, these ditches allowed households to grow consistent harvests while conserving resources. Keyhole raised beds. Keyhole beds combined raised soil mounds with central compost baskets. The circular design had a notch cut into one side, forming a keyhole-shaped access point. Compost and water added into the center basket leached nutrients into the surrounding bed, feeding crops evenly. Your grandma often lined the basket with straw before filling it, slowing decomposition and helping retain moisture. The raised soil improved drainage, making these beds productive even on heavy clay. They also brought crops to a comfortable working height, reducing bending during harvest. Keyhole beds were especially efficient in small gardens, concentrating fertility and minimizing water loss. Crops like lettuce, carrots, and spinach thrived in the nutrient-rich soil. The design allowed continuous recycling of kitchen waste while delivering steady growth. Built from stones, bricks, or earth, keyhole beds blended resourcefulness with practicality. Their compact circular layout provided both beauty and utility. Hyacinth water growth. Hyacinth bulbs thrived in water when supported properly. A bulb was placed with its base just touching the water surface in a glass vase, encouraging roots to grow downward while the flower stalk rose upward. Your grandparents sometimes dropped a single piece of charcoal into the water to keep it clear and free of algae, ensuring the bulb stayed healthy. This method produced elegant blooms indoors during winter, brightening homes when gardens lay dormant. Bulbs required cool, dark conditions at first, then were moved into sunlight once roots were established. The spectacle of flowers appearing without soil impressed children and added color to tables or windowsills. After blooming, the bulbs were often replanted in soil outdoors to recover for another season. Growing hyacinths in water required little effort, yet provided beauty and fragrance, showing how household items could bring natural displays inside. Vinegar Ant Control. Vinegar, when sprayed along ant trails, disrupted their scent paths and scattered colonies. Mixed with water, it was applied directly to entry points around plants or garden beds. The strong odor repelled ants without harming soil or crops. Your grandpa often soaked rags in vinegar and tucked them at the base of fruit trees, extending the effect for days at a time. This discouraged ants from climbing and farming aphids on the leaves. Vinegar sprays also worked on patios and greenhouse corners, reducing infestations where ants clustered. Reapplication was needed after rain, but the cost was minimal and the method safe. For gardeners trying to protect young plants from damage, vinegar provided a straightforward solution. It combined household supplies with sharp efficiency, giving crops a chance to grow without any interference. Though temporary, the barrier kept pressure low enough for plants to establish and thrive during vulnerable stages. Medieval crop rotation. Crop rotation was used to maintain soil fertility across seasons. Fields were divided into sections, each planted with different crops in sequence to prevent exhaustion of nutrients. Grains were followed by legumes, which restored nitrogen, while root crops loosened soil for the next cycle. Your grandparents often marked their garden into thirds, planting potatoes in one, beans in another, and leaving the last fallow or sown with green manure. This ensured no single patch was depleted or overrun by pests tied to one crop. Over time, the system balanced soil health, increased yields, and reduced disease spread. Crop rotation required planning but rewarded effort with stronger plants and fewer failures. Even small gardens benefited, with rotations built into raised beds or strips. Food storage tricks. Garden produce didn't last long without preservation, so households developed simple ways to keep it edible. Root vegetables were stored in cool cellars, layered with sand or straw to prevent rot. Apples were wrapped individually in paper and stacked in crates, keeping them from bruising and spoiling. Beans, corn, and peas were dried in the sun before being sealed in jars or cloth sacks. Your grandma often tucked bay leaves into storage bins, knowing the scent deterred insects from creeping in. Pickling jars lined shelves with cucumbers, beets, and onions preserved in vinegar brine. Drying herbs tied in bunches and hung from rafters ensured seasoning through winter months. Even milk was turned into butter or cheese, extending its shelf life. These techniques were tailored to what each household produced, and nothing went to waste. By combining cool storage, drying, pickling, and careful packing, families enjoyed steady food supplies when gardens lay dormant. Cover crop feeding. Cover crops such as clover, rye, and vetch were planted not for harvest but for soil improvement. Their roots held soil together through winter, preventing erosion, while their foliage added organic matter once tilled under. Legumes in particular fixed nitrogen, enriching the ground for the next crop. Your grandpa often scattered clover seed across bare patches after autumn harvest, ensuring the soil stayed alive instead of lying empty. In spring, he dug the plants back into the ground, creating a green manure that fed vegetables to come. Cover crops also suppressed weeds, reducing labor the following season. They encouraged soil organisms, maintaining fertility without chemical inputs. By alternating cash crops with cover plants, gardens remained productive year after year. Aloe Fertilizer Mix. Aloe vera was more than a healing plant. It was also used as a garden fertilizer. The fleshy leaves were crushed into a gel and diluted with water before being poured around seedlings. The mix provided trace nutrients and natural growth stimulants. Your grandparents sometimes blended the gel with compost tea, creating a richer solution that fueled young plants during their most fragile stage. Aloe improved root development and helped plants resist disease, especially when applied after transplanting. Unlike synthetic fertilizers, it didn't overwhelm crops, but gave steady support. The gel broke down quickly in soil, feeding microbes that supported fertility. Aloe leaves were harvested continuously, making it a renewable source of input in gardens where the plant thrived. Weather sign reading. Before weather forecasts, gardeners relied on observation of the sky, plants, and animals to predict conditions. Red sunsets, shifting winds, and cloud shapes hinted at approaching rain or dry spells. Birds flying low suggested falling air pressure and storms on the way. Your grandpa often watched how leaves turned their undersides upward before heavy rain, timing his sowing accordingly. Frogs croaking loudly, halos around the moon, or sudden insect swarms were other signals he noted. These signs were not always exact, but they guided decisions on planting, watering, and harvesting. Weather awareness kept crops safe from sudden frosts or wasted seedings. Families passed down these cues through experience, sharpening the gardener's eye with every season. Even as forecasts became more accessible, traditional signs remained in use because they taught close attention to nature itself. Stone mulch method. Flat stones spread across soil worked as mulch in hot climates. They shielded the ground from direct sunlight, slowing evaporation and keeping roots cooler. At night, stones released stored heat, evening out temperature swings that stressed plants. Your grandma often used smooth river rocks around her melon patch, arranging them tightly enough to cover soil, but loosely enough to allow water in. The method also suppressed weeds as little light reached the ground beneath. Over time, moisture collected under the stones, encouraging worms and soil life to thrive. Unlike organic mulches, stones didn't break down, making them a long-term solution for dry gardens. They were especially valuable in regions with limited rainfall, stretching every drop of water further. By carefully selecting and positioning stones, households created microclimates that supported crops through scorching conditions without costly irrigation. Rabbit manure secret. Rabbit droppings were one of the most effective natural fertilizers. Unlike some manures, they could be applied directly without composting, as they were gentle yet nutrient-rich. They provided nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, supporting both leafy growth and root development. Your grandpa often mixed fresh droppings with straw bedding before spreading them, improving soil texture and avoiding clumping. Rabbit manure didn't burn plants and continued to release nutrients slowly as it broke down. It was especially prized for boosting vegetable beds and fruit bushes. Beyond fertilization, the pellets encouraged microbial life, feeding the soil as well as the plants. Keeping rabbits served a dual purpose: meat or fur for the household and manure for the garden. The steady supply of clean, dry droppings made them a preferred choice among gardeners. Which of these tricks would you rely on for your garden? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more garden hacks. See you in the next one.